voice out there who are itching for more than the everyday grind. Here's your host, JB Atkins.
Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to the Creative Nomad Show. I am so happy and blessed today that we get to really talk to this phenomenal human, Michelle Steiner. You know, Michelle is really working with people that might have invisible handicaps and helping them to really have their voices heard. And that's so important. I mean, I worked with my mom for a long time, um, who has um, neuralgia and a few other things, and you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, she's handicapped, but try to get her to walk all the way down, not being a handicapped spot. A lot of times I would end up dropping her off at the door because she just couldn't walk that much. So I think it's super important the work that she's doing. Michelle, thank you so much for being here today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, my name is Michelle Steiner, and I live in Pennsylvania with my husband Ron and our two cats, Jack and Sparrow. And I work as a paraeducator in a school with students who have disabilities and some who don't. They just need a little extra help. And I'm also a disability writer, speaker, and photographer. And I have a blog called Michelle's Mission, where I write about having a learning disability, and I feature my photography on my store as well. And I also have a learning disability myself.
Wow. What was it like having that kind of disability where people might not know, right? And then you have to explain or you have to stay. What was that like growing up?
Right. Well, just like with your mom, a lot of people don't know that I have a disability. Now, when I was growing up, it was a little different. I can remember I went to a very small conservative school district where I couldn't blend in and I couldn't hide the fact that I went to learning support for classes, or I went to get a test read, or to get extra time on a test or assignments. And a lot of my peers, when they saw that, they did not accept me for who I was. A lot of them did not think that I was smart. They lumped me in with all the other learning support peers. So that was really difficult for me, especially in the beginning. It was really hard to be accepted. And it was also really hard academically for me in the beginning as well.
Wow, I can only imagine. So, what was really a turning point for you when you realized that, things could be better?
I can remember whenever I was a teenager and it got a lot worse with the bullying, that I started to look outside of my school district for some resources. And I can remember I found an art program that was right outside of our school district. And I loved writing. That was always something that I really loved to do. And I found acceptance with this group of peers. And that made it a lot easier because I could shed that reputation of being the outcast that I had since I was in kindergarten. And I later found that other people had disabilities and they were able to encourage me with that. And then after the group stopped meeting, I found another group, another writing group. And this was adults that were just a couple years older than I was. And they love to write. And this group, we're still together 30 some years later. We still
Wow.
meet once a month to talk about our writing, and we're in each other's lives with weddings and gatherings. And they got to see me grow as a person and a writer too. But I can remember just that encouragement that they had all through my life. Oh, you should really write about having a disability. And when I found that support outside of that, that really helped me to view myself as somebody that was acceptable and provided a lot of support and just a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I can imagine. So how has that affected so is it okay if I ask a little bit more about your learning disability and how that affected, like, what does that look like? So, what did that look like for you growing up? Because I know that there's a lot of different learning disabilities and they all
Mhm.
kind of manifest differently for people.
Right. I was diagnosed whenever I was in kindergarten, so it showed up really early. My teacher could see that I was really struggling with counting, visual perception, also tying my shoes, my handwriting. All those things were really hard for me when I was really young. I can remember dot to dot pages were also not a lot of fun. I thought I was doing them correctly and I got it back, and wow, it was another story. And I was my parents' first child, so they didn't have a lot to base on what development was at that age.
Mhm.
And they recommended that I get tested for having one, and they really didn't even know the specifics. Learning disabilities were more of a blanket term that they gave at that during that time period. I really struggled with anything math related. They knew I wasn't going to be a mathematician at age 5.
I got that. Me either, by the way.
Yeah, which is fine. But I can remember in the beginning, I even struggled with reading comprehension. I was a good reader. I could read the words on the page, but it was hard for me to retain what I was reading. It was really difficult. Anything with numbers. We spent a lot of countless hours trying to memorize addition, subtraction, and multiplication facts, and I still don't know some of them off the top of my head today. I'm also not able to read the face of a clock, despite many interventions with that. And I use my Fitbit for that. And
Yeah.
I can just remember it was hard because I was in all regular rate classes except for math. And I thought to myself, well, what is this going to mean in the future for me? How is this really going to affect me? Because and I didn't feel very smart too. I think that was really hard growing up with those feelings.
Yeah, I can imagine because we all have those things that make us other,
Yeah.
right? We all have them. And
Right.
and sometimes they're outward and sometimes they're not. I was a different kid. I was a different kid too. And I was always in my head. I didn't play sports. I wasn't the sports guy. I still I was I'm gay. I've been gay my whole life.
Right.
And when you look back at the signs and clues, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
Hindsight. But um and so I was teased. I was never, well, actually in my
Mhm.
elementary school I was really thin. So I went from being
Mhm.
really super thin to being chunky, not fat, not I've never been
Mhm.
I'm the fattest I've ever been, and I still don't consider myself fat. Um, but we have those things, right?
Yeah.
And kids are evil, and I had buck teeth. I remember people talk about my teeth, and I never had a good haircut. like, it's the 80s. They didn't know how to cut hair.
No,
Let's
they
face it,
didn't. All the style. No, they didn't.
they didn't. 70s, 80s, you didn't have a haircut. We're just now learning how to cut the hair for the hair that I had, which,
Yeah.
obviously it's not a problem anymore. But, you know, I'm glad that you found ways, all that to say, I'm glad you found ways to actually use that productively. And I know that you're helping a lot of other kids and other people, really find
Mhm.
themselves to be okay with themselves. And that's so important these days, you know. How has that really affected your writing? So math is out, right? We're not gonna go in there and do math. And
Yeah.
you're not writing math books, obviously.
No,
So
no, no, no. I think writing was one of the first things that I was good at. And I like to also say, too, my handwriting has never been great. But once I learned how to type, that was a real game changer for me. But it opened up a different world for me. I can remember my reading and writing was always really important with my family. My dad would read me books every night, and that cultivated such a love for reading for me.
yeah.
And I can remember I wrote a story about a dinosaur, and my dad saw it and he said, "This is really good." And I was in second or third grade at that time. And I thought, wow, I did something that somebody remarked on that was good, because I didn't think that I had anything that I was talented with or that I could offer. And that was one of the first things I found out that I was really good at. And that just encouraged me to write even more. And when I found my adult writing group, I had a lot of my friends who thought I was was definitely mature for my age. And they said, you should really write about having a learning disability. And I thought, oh, I don't know about that. That's a little personal. I think I wrote some bad poetry and some other really cringy things at that time. But
I'm a published poet. I
yeah,
understand the cringe poetry at 18. Like I got it.
yeah. Oh, yes. And it took me a long time to be able to write about having a disability. It wasn't until I graduated from college, and it wasn't until that I was married and we moved into our first house, and there was a door that I couldn't unlock. And that was really frustrating for me. And I can remember there was a call for writing on the Mighty. And one of the prompts for that month was, what is a really easy task for other people, but it's really hard for you with your disability? And I didn't even know I had limited hand dexterity until I was an adult. So some of this stuff on what to do, it is a new concept. So I can just remember writing about that. And when I got that published, that was just, it was just amazing. It was very healing for me. I can also remember I had a lot of people that said, well, that's my story, or I struggle with that too. So what that did was that encouraged me to write other stories, and they got published, and I had more people that were saying that it was helping them. And I started my own blog a few years ago with articles and also some pictures that I end up taking on my walks because I'm not able to drive because of my disability.
Wow. Have you ever had a Purdue test?
I do remember those. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So I had brain surgery. My last name is
Mhm.
Purdue, Jeff Purdue Atkins, right? And I had brain surgery back in 97.
Mhm.
And so they were testing my dexterity in both hands and all
Yep.
that kind of stuff. That test makes you cry. Thinking about that test makes you cry. So I get it, right?
Yeah.
Just the frustration of something that they're saying, well, this should be easy. You're picking up a low peg and a low washer. And
Yeah.
even as I'm doing this with my left hand, I'm going, that doesn't feel right. Just a low peg and a little washer and putting it on a board. Like you've been doing this stuff since you were a kid, putting the
Yeah.
round peg in the round hole, and it was one of the most frustrating things I've ever done in my life. I ended up throwing that test a couple times. Wow. I wasn't expecting to go all there.
I had a funny story when we first found out about that, because I had evaluations where they didn't do something with that, or it might have been a block test or something. But I can remember they tested me and they blindfolded me and had me put shapes in a shape sorter. And it's an 8-hour test. The whole thing together was 8 hours. So I ordered in lunch. And as I'm blindfolded and trying to put these shapes in a shape sorter, my lunch came and I had to sign blindfolded for my delivery. And I thought that poor delivery driver, he probably wondered what in the world was going on. But I understand how frustrating it is. And I think some of the things, not only with the Purdue, but with a lot of the other things, when they were telling you weren't answering questions right. And I had classes at college that explained cognitive development, what they were testing, and I knew I wasn't doing good. And that is very heartbreaking when you're in there, and it just seems like that's so easy and you can't do it. I hear you on that.
Yeah. And, I just pictured you with the key, you know what I mean, on this lock. And I'm like, that's the Purdue test. I like everything in it. And my right hand was okay. My right hand's okay. It's my left hand that's really, really underdeveloped. Like, so
I have it in both. So both hands, just sometimes I think one is stronger than the other one, but it's not by much. They're all very affected with having that. And it was a good thing though when we found out, because the light bulb just went off after I figured out. I'm like, oh, that's why my handwriting was really bad when I was young. It's not that I was trying to be sloppy or lazy. That's why it is. And that's why I'm not simply clumsy. The reason why things fall out of my hands isn't because I'm a klutz necessarily. It's more my hands just don't work that as well.
Yeah. I totally get it. Like I
Yeah.
remember
Hmm.
having a cup. It's gotten better. I mean, it's
Yeah.
been way too long. I'm not admitting to that age. So that's the surgery. And it has gotten better. So, but I remember like not being like missing the table, putting
Yeah.
glasses down. You know, the simple like it just isn't where you thought it was. So
Yeah.
I totally understand what that looks like and how that feels. And what are some of the ways that you cope with that? Like, because it definitely is something that I know for me, I had to actually think this is a table, and I would put my hand down, one hand down on the table, and I could do it. But if I just tried to put the cup on the table, sometimes it didn't work. So I started putting my hand down, and I still do that. I realize.
Right. One of the ways that helps me is I'm not able to ever use a manual can opener, even from the time I was little. So I use an electric can opener. I also have bottle openers and jar openers that help too. I did a review on them a couple years ago for a magazine of what works for that,
Yeah.
because I wanted to look for things that could help me. And my husband actually likes them too. He's like, oh, this is really neat to
Right.
do that. Yeah, and I also type, and if I make a mistake, it's no big deal. But once I learned how to type, that was a really important thing because nobody was saying, "Oh, we can't understand what you're saying." Now people can, and I can see if there's a mistake or I typed the wrong key. It's not a big deal. It also took me a whole year rather than just that a semester to learn how to do it too, and that was a good thing that I learned how to do that. And I can also remember people would try to encourage me with my writing by saying, well, if you want to be a writer, you have to be neat. And to this day, I have not had an editor that has ever said, I want a handwritten thing in cursive for the submission. So there's a lot of technology that is out there, and it's just trying to find ways to be able to do some of that. And to give myself grace, I do miss where the table is, or I do drop something, and it just takes my brain a couple extra seconds to be able to pick it up. And I also think too, what also is really helpful is a lot of places in the community with ADA having automatic doors, because
Mhm.
sometimes even if it's just a door you push in, it can be really hard to open, but having automatic doors helps too.
Wow. I never even thought of it that way. Like the automatic doors being very helpful for that. But I know that
Hmm.
there's been doors that mom can't open. As she
Yeah,
pulls out, and they're heavy. Some doors
yeah,
are heavy. I don't know why, but they are. Um, and it's even for me, it wasn't like, oh, here you go. It was like, oh, this is a door.
yeah.
So some of them are
Right,
much heavier. Maybe they
right.
have bulletproof glass, whatever. Who knows these days? So I love that you've gotten that. And it's funny when you said I've never had an editor that said that I had to write in cursive, neat cursive. In middle school, I had a teacher that he went back to handwriting. Right, this is an A, this is a B. If you can't
Oh
make
my.
this as an A, right, this is middle school. It was advanced
Yeah,
English, and he spent 2 weeks on handwriting at the very beginning because this is before computers. So, um, you were turning in handwritten stuff that to be edited. Um, and he would go, and so we did a whole 2 weeks, and he said, if you can't do that, the only thing you ever have to sign is your name.
yeah.
The only thing that ever has to be in cursive is your name. And actually, that nowadays doesn't even have to be in cursive, you
Oh, it
know.
doesn't have to be. No, e- exactly. But I still am in some, I've been in classrooms where they were like, oh, you have to have the perfect handwriting, or they'll make comments. And I'm thinking, it's important that they know how to sign their name. And even
Mhm.
sometimes you don't have to do that. but there's just so many other ways. And that's why I really encourage the students I'm with when they're in a keyboarding class and they say, I'm never going to use this. I'm thinking, well, this is important. That this really is an important class to know how to do that.
Yeah, I did take a computer class in middle
Mhm.
school, but it was on Apple too. Okay.
Okay.
We didn't have Microsoft until high school, and I never took a computer class in high school because
Okay.
it was right. I was right before, like,
Oh, all
right.
right.
I'm in the generation that was like right before the internet. Like
Right.
my, we didn't have a computer in my house until after I graduated high school.
Oh my God.
Okay. So literally the year I graduated high school, the year I moved out, my mom bought a computer because she went back to school and she realized she needed a computer for it. Because at that point she was in college and
And you
she needed
needed
a
that,
computer.
right?
Right. Um, so I learned because of my brain surgery, that's how I learned computers and how I learned how to type. Like
Yeah.
it I couldn't so speaking of ways to adapt, if you have this
Mhm.
learning disability, at the time I was super photosensitive. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't do like whole but I couldn't read black and white text. And we realized that at the time you could go in and lock your browser settings.
Okay.
You can't do this anymore, but you used to be able to go in and lock your browser settings so your display would be whatever you locked it in as. And so that allowed me to go into chat rooms, right? And like communicate with people because I wasn't allowed to go out. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. I was still, very
Mhm.
very slow. I walked out of the hospital. I could walk,
Mhm.
but it was kind of like a toddler. I was I could move. I had thought, I could speak. I was lucky
Mhm.
in so many ways. But everything was hard. Everything wasn't natural. Everything wasn't there. It was like
Mhm.
I would search for words all the time. I would search for all that stuff. But being able to type and being able to look at the computer screen and type and it's kind of like it was a whole
Mhm.
game changer when I could do that.
Yep.
It was literally almost a year before I could watch TV again.
Wow.
So it was 6 months before I went back to work. I went back to work 6 months later, which was crazy, phenomenal. Um, and I probably should have waited another month because of the job I did. Um,
Mhm.
but it, like I said, it was a year before I could read. It was black and
Right.
white text. I had problems at work because of the black and white.
Mhm.
Um, so like I said, I probably should have waited another month. If it did
Right.
start, I did start being able to understand it a little bit better, and because there was so much other color, it was
Mhm.
kind of drowned it out, so it didn't hurt as bad. But I wear
Right.
glasses at work, like during the day, like at night, and I'm wearing sunglasses, and people are like, "What are you doing?" Well, my eyes aren't adjusting.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So there's all kinds of. I just am so impressed at how adaptive you've been and how much you help people to adapt.
Yeah, because I mean that's the thing with having a learning disability. It's one of those things it's not something you can cure, but it is something that we can find ways to be able to deal with things. And it's always more empowering for me to be able to focus on what I can do and what I can change rather than things I can't.
And I think that, one of the things that's really difficult, and tell me if this
Mhm.
is wrong, because I know I dealt with a little bit of this too. Um, People think you're stupid, like you're
Yeah.
not intelligent, when in reality, you're very intelligent. You just don't know how to express that sometimes or don't express it the same way. Has that been an issue?
Yes, I've had a lot of people that think when they hear learning disability, they think, oh, well, you obviously can't learn. And of course, growing up, a lot of my peers didn't view me as smart. And even the ones in learning support, a lot of them struggle more with reading and I struggle more with math. So they didn't think I was. So that was an issue. And a lot of times, because my test scores were so low, even some of the psychiatrists who evaluated me thought, well, you're not going to be able to go on to pass community college. And the thing is, well, if I'm going to study math, well, probably not. It is always going to be a struggle for me, but that's not what I chose. And I had to be really wise in a lot of those choices. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I also encounter is a lot of people will say, especially those who have known me, oh, you must not have a learning disability anymore because you're out of school, or you graduated from college, or you have a job. And the truth is, I will always have one. It's just simply finding different ways to be able to cope and to be able to deal with it, and not putting myself in situations where I can't do something, and just focusing on what I can do, and just that humans are so adaptable to a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think that you hit on the head. Einstein once said,
Mm-hmm.
This is a really famous Einstein quote, that if you're going to judge a fish by how well they climb trees, then you're always going to think they're stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we all have our different unique abilities, and we have our different unique things, and just because they're not necessarily the same as what you, or you have to adapt, or you have to do things differently, why is my way better than your way?
Right.
And as your husband found out, a lot of these tools are freaking handy.
Yeah, they are.
Like the jar opener. I have a jar opener. I understand. And I bought the jar opener not because I couldn't do it, because I can, but because it's a lot of times my grip strength isn't great. And I noticed it. I'm not the one that's going to open your pickle jar, And I realized I have pickle jars. So I got a jar opener. I'm like, oh, this is the difference. Okay, cool. Never have a problem with the jar again.
No, because they're just you don't have a problem with them, and they're neat. Like my husband said, he doesn't have those issues, but he likes them. He thinks, oh, these are really cool. I like working with having some of those things, and it just involves sometimes just having those ideas. And that's where we see universal design be able to help out so many other people. And we can see that when we're in the community with elevators. I mean, I'm not able to take an escalator, so I can use the elevator. But that's also people that are with me can do that too, if that's what they choose to do. Door openers, people movers, those are all things that might have been whenever they first had ADA, that's what they were designing for people with physical disabilities, turned out to be something that was a benefit everybody could use.
Yeah. It's so amazing. So, Michelle, tell people how to get in touch with you.
At my blog, michellesmission.net.
That's awesome. And I actually got it there. michellesmission.net. Make sure you find out about her. She is such an amazing human. I am so proud and happy that she's chose my show to be on. Thank you. Just thank you
so much. Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you for having me. It's certainly been a pleasure.
All right, folks. Join us again next week at 12 o'clock noon over for the Creative Nomad show. We'll have something tomorrow night. We are going for the Tuesday Creators Talks. We're going to be talking about changing the narrative we have the amazing Carol Boston on. You don't want to miss this. 7 p.m. tomorrow right here. And know that you are loved. I'll see you guys all very soon.
Thank you for watching the Creative Nomad Show. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, check out creativenomadshow.com. There is also a link at the bottom if you are an awesome creator and would like to be a guest. Know that you are loved. Everyone here at the True Awesome Network asks you to please subscribe, like, comment, and
Fred, awesome.